Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here, Pro Wrestling Logic, and a return to the Tuesday Night Titans TNT review series. This particular episode is the August 2nd, 1985. We are more than a year into this program, and we're about a year away from being done with the program, just a little bit over. So, anyway, interesting there. But back to a relatively nondescript version of the program this week. Although there is some cringe-worthy stuff as we go forward. Um, we open with a look at the wedding of Quick Draw Rick McGraw. He had mentioned getting married on a previous TNT, probably the last one, if not the one before. And they show wedding pictures. I don't really get this. Back in the 80s, your target market was either kids who aren't going to care about a wedding or men who aren't going to care about a wedding. So I never really understood the wedding demo. The only wedding demo I've actually ever truly, well, there's two. I understood the Triple H one to turn him heel in '99. It was unique. That's not my ideal time frame. And then I really understood the Randy Savage Miss Elizabeth one in '91, partially because I was part of the Target demo at the time and had, watched them reunite and all of that. And now, especially looking back at the '85 through '91 run, it's a perfect crescendo to their story. But as far as these other weddings, this is wrestling. This isn't a soap opera. And the episodic television nature of wrestling often makes people think it can be a soap opera. It's just goofy to me. Anyway, Ricky Steamboat, my all-time favorite babyface, is up next. Wearing a traditional Hawaiian shirt, he discusses his stitches. He discusses, the danger of being dropped on the world, kind of things being dangerous for him. He then admits to being fond of the fans, how hard wrestling is, the integration of martial arts into his career, among other things. In the middle here, there is Gino Caruso, Gino Carabello. Caruso's on the brain because I knew Gino Caruso back in the day, late 90s. Good guy and regular trainer for the tri-state area at the time. But Gino Carabello versus Ricky Steamboat, obviously a showcase match for Steamboat, who whether it's the Japanese-style arm drags or the various challenges associated there, whether it's the martial arts inclusion, whether it's the top rope cross body, Steamboat, I don't think, even in enhancement matches, I will challenge someone to do this, and we may not have enough old school fans quite yet with our current listener base, but I will challenge someone to do this. And post below if you find it, if there's a link to it, find a bad Ricky Steamboat match. I don't recall ever seeing one that I would honestly say that match was horrible. So I'm challenging everybody on the internet, find a bad Ricky Steamboat match. I'd really be intrigued to know what one of those looks like. Anyway, Steamboat reacts to the laying out and hanging and whipping by Mr. Fuji and Don Morocco. Fuji and Morocco's feud starts here. And they go really right up until the Jake Roberts feud in more towards 86. So if you think about it, Steamboat's got a pretty good run there of major feuds. He's got Morocco, and then he moves on to Roberts, and then he moves on to Randy Savage. That's a heck of a 3-year run. He does languish after taking time off, after dropping the Intercontinental title in the summer of '87, into leaving right after WrestleMania 4 in '88. So, that last bit of the run, the last probably Oh, 8 or 9 months probably isn't much fun, but overall, I mean, just building him, it's clear that even bringing him in '85, Vince wants to do something with him. I would contend that if they had turned him heel, which I think would have been difficult, Ricky as a heel would have been challenging, but if they had turned him heel, he could have been an interesting dichotomy for a challenge for Hogan. Brought good matches out of Hogan, and also maybe you could have had him as a heel as a world champion. Um, Obviously, you weren't going to have him beat Hogan, and he wasn't going to outshine Hogan during the time he was there. But I still contend that there was a way to make him a world champion to bring quality matches out of people. Mean Gene Okerlund goes into the bushes, into the jungle, and he finds Corporal Kirshner. Now, for those unfamiliar with Corporal Kirshner, Mike Kirshner, who later portrayed the original Leatherface in Japan, wrestles quite a bit, although not that long in the WWF, probably a couple of years at maximum in the WWF area, but is a response to the departed Sgt Slaughter, whom they were planning to do major things with, and he wanted rights to his freedom to do things with the G.I. Joe franchise. Vince McMahon did not want to give him that at the time. Slaughter left for, well, let's see, probably about 4-ish years, something like that, maybe closer to 4.5, and then comes back and gets a title run. But they attempted to have a couple of military characters in the interim here. None ever got over to the level of Slaughter. Kirshner, not a terrific wrestler, but he's seen diving out of planes and diving in swamps, and they really hype him up as a major American hero type. Um, I think any fan who had been around for the Slaughter days would have seen what this was and probably wouldn't have gone very far with it. Captain Lou Albano is up next. He is pontificating about physical fitness, which the same things he always says, cut your carbs, unborn virgin goat's milk, just random things, and certainly the captain is a walking advertisement for Dunlap syndrome. His belly Dunlapped his belt. Maybe one day I'll do a story time about my interactions with Captain Lou in the late '90s, but doesn't fit here. Anyway, George Steele, who is under the auspices of the captain, now, and Steve Lombardi go to work. Yes, that's Steve Lombardi, later the Brooklyn Brawler. Lombardi runs from '83 up until the late 2000 teens. I think he had 30 plus years with the company. And it's just weird. Part of me wants to go check out his shoot interview on the High Spots Network just because I'm sure he's got stories of some really interesting things. Anyway, Steele beats him up, punches and kicks, and George Steele by this point not anything more than a cartoon, but a cartoon that makes some good money for a few years. And who would begrudge somebody that? Of course, Steele, a gym teacher in, I want to say the Detroit area, something like that. Anyhow, Steele wins with a flying hammerlock, I believe, and then we go back to the captain, who acknowledges the calcium deposits in the medulla oblongata. In other words, George Steele has brain damage. Big surprise there. Takes him to Dr. Sigman Ziff. Then we see one of the more classic segments in TNT history. They put a bowl-shaped helmet on the animal. They shock therapy him into saying things such as, "How now, brown cow," and other great pontifications. And then they turn the juice up too much, taking him from a genius back to an imbecile with one fall swoop. Magnificent Morocco and Mr. Fuji join the show. Obviously, they gloat over what has happened to Ricky Steamboat. Vince McMahon is good at showing his indignation here. Jim Young versus Magnificent Morocco. I've got to do some more research on Jim Young because he's popping up a lot, and I seem to remember that there was thought that he was going to be a bigger deal. Very good match here for Young as he gets a little bit of offense, but he looks good in almost every enhancement match that he is given here. And you know, I mean, Morocco talks a great deal about the rift with Ricky Steamboat. He feels disrespected by Steamboat. They're both of the Pacific Islands, and that's brought into it. I've mentioned before, Morocco, not my cup of tea during this time period. Really, not my cup of tea ever. Just not a guy that connects with me. Maybe he would have connected with me had I been younger during his prime, but his prime had passed by. As a matter of fact, I think he was on one of his sojourns to Hawaii when I became a fan in '89. So all I've seen of him is older stuff, obviously, before I became a fan, and he just never fully clicked with me. Anyway, his stuff with Steamboat is worth checking out if you like the feud between the two or you've never seen it. Not disparaging, and obviously iconic for the role with Jimmy Snuka, but definitely Morocco an acquired taste. Albano is back to close the program. He is very disheveled about the issues with Dr. Sigman Ziff. He is now of the opinion that Ziff is a quack, among other things, and we close the program with that. Overall, the only thing really worth going out of your way to see is the hilarity that is the George the Animal Steele segment for all the wrong reasons. If you think today's slapstick stuff is bad, this is really bad. Anyway, this closes this particular edition of the TNT Review Series. We'll be back with more. Keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Till next time, everybody.